Hello, and welcome to Career STEM Chats. In this episode, you'll be hearing a chat between Sarah Cardozo, a STEM career expert, and Dr. Joanne Kamens. Dr. Kamens earned her PhD in genetics from Harvard Medical School and has built a dynamic career across academia, pharmaceuticals, biotech, and the nonprofit world. But her impact extends far beyond research. Joanne founded the Boston chapter of the Association of Women in Science, sparking a lifelong commitment to understanding and addressing inequity in STEM. Joanne went on to serve as executive director and CEO of AdGene for 10 years, where she fostered a culture of collaboration and inclusion, helping the organization earn recognition as one of Boston's best places to work, including the top spot in 2016. Today, she brings her experience to her work as a consultant, helping teams and organizations build environments where people can thrive. She also serves as Director of Alumni Programming at FarmStars and sits on multiple boards supporting women and underrepresented scientists. As scientist, mentor, and advocate, Dr. Joanne Kamens continues to redefine leadership in STEM. Here's our interview with Dr. Kamens.
One of the reasons, Joanne, I was so looking forward for you to be a guest on the podcast was because you have had one of the most unusual scientific careers and still maintain your identity as a scientist. And so if you could help our audience understand from, let's say, your PhD, what you did, where you went,
Sure.
what was that like, and then bring us through from job to job and let us know what were the skills, the expertise that you learned in each one of those positions that got you to the next.
Great. Well,
Good.
so you're so good at describing, like those are the key factors. I always say that everything I learned always brought me to the next thing, and it all kind of added together. And I didn't always know what was going to be the important things. Like early in my career, I got kind of crazy about organizing the freezer, and that turned out to be like important 20 years later. So I don't think you can always predict. So I feel like you're always learning and getting a cadre of skills that are going to serve you, at some point. So yeah, so I did a very hardcore bench, grad degree in yeast genetics. I chose that lab because it was a small lab, and I'm a firstborn. I knew that like high touch is a good way for me to interact with the mentor. So I had a PI who was in the lab next to me all the time, talking to me all the time, was super supportive. I was super lucky because I had a baby, and there was no policy then. I had no money, and I couldn't not have a stipend. I wouldn't have had food. So he basically figured out a way to kind of keep paying me through the whole thing. We kind of off the record, and was super supportive. I couldn't have done it without him. And he was a fantastic mentor, science mentor as well. So
Wow. Lucky.
so lucky. And a lot of the work we do is about helping people not be lucky, but I was lucky. And then, he helped me get my first job, which, remember pre-internet, remember ads in the newspaper, and he knew people because he was interested in the nascent biotech industry. It was really like GI, Genetics Institute and Genentech was really nothing else. And he had a friend who was going to be starting up this biology kind of biotechy part of BASF and in Boston, which is a German company. And he introduced me to the CEO of that outpost of BASF in Boston. And I interviewed at about 3 places, all people he introduced me to at Genetics Institute at this place. And I got an offer and I took it. It was not, and I would say also I didn't postdoc. I couldn't afford it. I had a baby, and my advisor was incredibly supportive. I didn't learn till later about the whole angst about like, oh, I can't leave academia. I was like, why would I stay in academia? I wouldn't be good at it. And my advisor was like, you wouldn't be good at it. Let's get you a job. You're going to be good at so many things. And it was many years before I was like, what's wrong with people? Like, this is your degree. You get to do anything you want with it. You don't have to go into academia. So that was my first job, and I went from bench work to bench work and started at the bench. And that was great. I loved it. Pharma offered incredible resources, incredible people to talk to. I talked to everybody I could and learned. I was the only person like who ever went to tour the plant in the back. There was a, we were made Humira in the back of the building. And I went one day and I'm like, can I put a suit on and go see how you make Humira? And they're like, nobody ever asked us that before. I'm like, oh, interesting. So I was just like a sponge. So I think that's what I took from pharma is learning all the parts of pharma and drug discovery that I could. Also, the offerings were great. Like all this management training was offered, and I just took every opportunity to learn about how to manage people, how to manage projects, how to anytime, learn a whole new field. We're interested in this. I would go to a conference and learn a whole new field. So it really was, I was a yeast geneticist and did immunology. So I had to learn all of immunology and I had great mentors for that. So to me, it was just like university kept going. I was just learning all the time and that was delightful to me. So I really loved pharma. I learned a huge amount. I was there for 15 years. BAS
Wow.
acquired by Abbott about halfway through my time.
So let me just ask you one question. During that
Yeah.
time in pharma, how were the promotions for you? And how did you get those promotions?
Perfect question. Yep. Super important. You can't be in one place without getting promoted. Doesn't look good. So first one was pretty easy because I was a scientist. I'd never done a postdoc. And they said, if you work here for a year, you'll become a senior scientist. And it took a little longer than a year, but I did. So I had to kind of meet the qualifications of post PhD time to go to the next level. So I didn't manage people when I arrived there, but then I actually had someone report to me who I had been a peer actually, but a technician, and they're super talented in industry. The technicians are really talented. They're scientists in their own right. And then when I started managing someone, they promoted me to be a senior scientist, and that went well. I was good at managing them. We were very productive together as a team, so they gave me another one. And then they gave me another one who was like about to get fired and having a bad time, and I resuscitated them, and they became good. So now I was like, I had three people and I was good, and then I got promoted again. So that I became like a senior scientist too, about 4 years later down the pike. So it was kind of a natural progression managed, but I was still doing bench work and I was still, managing, still doing my own contributions along with managing technicians. And then, um, and then I started to really manage another PhD. And that was the next promotion was going to be to group leader. And that was a rough one because,
Why?
I had been there a long time. People remembered me as that little scientist
Ah,
who made lots of mistakes in the early years. I'm happy to talk about some of those. So you have like a reputation that follows you. A lot of people now I'm at Abbott. A lot of people work at Abbott for a long time, never leave. So there's a long memory. And no women from the company had ever been promoted from within to group leader.
oh, so you were the first.
Outside, I was one of the first. I was the first actually to be promoted from within to group leader, not from somewhere else to come in as a
Got
group.
it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that is just clear bias. I can tell you a million stories, but that's not what we're talking about today. There was a ton of bias going on there. I finally went into my boss's office and said, I am managing two PhDs, the sequencing facility, the cloning facility, the viral vector facility, and I have proposed three projects that went into research to be like drug development projects, which is like the best thing you can do in pharma is really bring a project forward that becomes a real project. If I don't get promoted to group leader, it's not a threat. It's just I can't stay here because I'm already a group leader. Okay, so I'm already doing that. And, my boss, who was really quite a good, fair-minded boss, said, well, I'm going to do my best. And I'm like, you can do all you want, but I am going to leave if I don't get this promotion. And it's not angry. It's just like, I will never get it. I'm already doing the job. I could not be doing it anymore. And he actually,
Good.
are you sure you want this promotion? I mean, you have two small children. It's kind of a busy.
Oh,
And I
oh,
looked at him and I said, you did not say that. And he said, I did not say that. So we moved on. So, and I was like, really? And he knew right away after it came out of his mouth that was like, you didn't really say that to me. So I got promoted a few months down the line and I became a group leader. Really enjoyed that. And I was in that position for about 4 years also. And I really would have been happy doing that for a really long time. I didn't have a need to be. It wasn't about titles for me. It was about, was I doing interesting things? And then two things precipitated my starting to look elsewhere. And I don't know if you know, we talked about this story. I don't remember if I've told you this.
Our audience
Yeah,
doesn't
I
know,
know.
Joanne.
So first they laid off. First we had some layoffs, and the first round of layoffs is always people who deserve to be laid off. So everybody's calm about it because it's the bad people. Okay. And that happened. And then they went to another round of layoffs about 6 months later, and now it's some of the good people. And one of my PhDs who was doing discovery research, not service work, like not a core facility, he got laid off. And I had to lay him off. They told me I had to lay him off. And then I had a technician who reported directly to me who was a very, very experienced senior technician. And she was like moved to another group after working with me for many years to be more critical path, work. So they took away my hands, basically. I was too busy to do bench work because I had such a big group. Now I had about 10 people and many multiple facilities I was managing. And they took her away from me. So that was like I no longer could do my own exploratory work. So those were like two things that I really loved. And then a new CEO came in and said only director level and above is allowed to do tech scouting now. And I had been doing a lot of tech scouting because I'm very interested in techie, molecular techie things like siRNA and RNAi and all these new technologies that this was pre-CRISPR, but that kind of technology that's what I really loved about science. And he said, no, no, group leaders can't do that. And I had been on multiple tech scouting trips to evaluate other companies and technologies, and I really enjoyed that. So my job just got really like boring and, circumspect. And then and then something happened, a very specific event and then a week after that event, I had lunch. A friend said, "Hey, I'm back in town from Colorado. You want to have lunch?" Someone that I'd been in touch with for many years. So just before that lunch, which is the pivotal lunch of me leaving, because he offered me a job pretty much on the spot, um, Abbott had built a mentoring program for the whole organization, and they were rolling it out. And they were looking for representatives from each site to kind of support the mentoring program. And by then, we were already working on the AWIS mentoring program, and I'd worked on the HBA mentoring program, and everyone knew I had a not so secret mentoring program for women at Abbott that I had created. They made us go off site because anyway, it's a long story. But people, I was speaking publicly on this topic. I was posting on LinkedIn on this topic. I was like the resident expert, basically. And there was no one else who came anywhere close to knowing as much as I did about mentoring. And I'm just waiting for them to call me to be this mentoring lead. And they invited another person to do it. And that person had lobbied because they wanted exposure in the mothership in Chicago at Abbott. And that person was not a good mentor,
Oh,
a great, not a great manager, like really, I think a really good person and good scientist, but just not a great manager nor mentor. And wow, I hope I don't know if that's gonna like this person may know who they are, but that was so that happened, and I was pretty upset because I saw that as an opportunity for my leadership to be recognized in this area. And of course, I was very interested in all my extracurricular work for women in STEM, which now is kind of full blown. It started a few years before, but now it's kind of full blown. And then I had this lunch. This friend said, "Hey, I'm back in town, and we're starting a new company, and we're gonna." He knew me through my work on RNAi in the early years in immune cells, which was quite groundbreaking. Like, not that many people were doing immune cell work with that technology. And that's what they were going to do. It was an RNAi company. And he said, "Hey, we need a director of research. It's going to be the director of discovery," which is like this, my mom loved that director of discovery.
imagine what a title.
Yeah. So, and I was like, couldn't, I mean, he's like, "Do you want to come work for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, it sounds great." So I gave notice and I finished at Abbott one day short of my 15th anniversary. They did try and take my honorary watch back, which was like cheap, like, but my boss said I should keep it. So my ex-boss. So, and I moved to this new startup, which was super fun, founded by a Nobel Prize winner who it was hot science and super techy, and I loved everything about it. And so I moved to RXI, which was great. And there I was now I'm in biotech, which was,
And so, what did you take from pharma into biotech?
yeah, so much. I mean, all those years of like management training and also in biotech, you're on the sell side, but in pharma, I was on the buy side. And bringing that perspective, I was one of the only people in the company who'd ever worked in a pharma. So I'd frequently be in meetings and they would say, like, hey, let's just do it this way. And I'd be like, you can't do it that way. Pharma's never going to listen to you if you do it that way, you know? So I really had
Ah,
this perspective. And I had managed a large group and I was there to manage people. And I had a lot of proven tactics for that to do it well. I was a good manager. And in fact, I managed the team at RXI for a couple years, but then the company turned to a very chemical, was all a lot about the chemistry, not so much about the biology, although I was still managing like the animal work and some of the biology. And I got moved because the work was being managed by a chemist at that point mostly. I moved into the business development group, which was another
oh,
which was a weird if you would have asked me in grad school, are you ever going to be business development? I would have been like, nah, that's never going to happen. They moved me because for a variety, it was complicated. There were some not good things and good things about it. But I had a great mentor there. So I basically, I was doing the alliance management on the science side, and then a business person was doing the business alliance management, and we were working together. And that was the amazing Romani Varanasi. She's a big biotechie in Boston, and really fantastic leader now. And at the time, she was a great mentor, and really sat me down and said, "Here's how we're going to do business development," and taught me how to propagate a hit list and where to look and how to do all this stuff. It was really great.
oh, how fabulous.
Yeah, it was great, and I learned a huge amount, and then biotech RXI kind of went under. It kind of went sideways. Hard to explain. The biotechy weird things happened, and I had to lay myself off in the whole research staff as all So that was not a fun day. Uh,
No.
in biotech, one easier thing about that is if you're in any position of leadership, you usually know it's coming. So I knew it was coming, and had some warning. Um, I also had the original CEO of the company had given me the advice to write severance into my contract, which I did.
Art.
Very smart and very nice of him because anybody who didn't have that in their contract only got like 2 weeks. And so that gave me a runway to start looking for my next job. So I was laid off. I had to start I hadn't made plans to look for a new job yet at that point. So, and I was there for about 4 years and learned a ton. Learned a huge amount about startups and biotech. We went public. So I learned about
Oh,
going
really?
was up on the big screen at NASDAQ, and the New York Stock Exchange. And we got to that trip. That was fun. So I learned about the filing, all the stuff you have to do to go public. And I had to provide some documentation. And I learned about writing press releases and I learned about like marketing a startup. It was just a constant learning experience. So that's one thing why biotech is really fun because you get to wear a lot of hats and you're always learning like to do new stuff. So, yeah.
And if the company had stayed in the original, with the original mission, do you think you would have stayed there longer or was it time to leave?
Oh, what a good question. I think it was a good time to leave because I didn't really want to go down the business development path. And the company, my science training wasn't really operative at that point enough there. And
Uh,
I don't have clinical experience, and it might have been nice to get some clinical experience. That might have been fun for me to watch the process. I got to see a little bit of that in the beginning. There is a product in testing actually that I helped, discover. That company spun back, got bought, moved into, whatever. It's called something else, um, but I think that might have been interesting. But I learned a lot of stuff there, and it was good to move on and do something different. You
good.
know, yeah.
And then what a shift.
Right. So then I said, okay, I'm really good at this alliance management thing, and I don't want to be in Worcester anymore. I lived in Newton. I commuted to Worcester for 18 years. And I said, I want to be in Cambridge. I want to commute in now, So I basically said, I want to work at a mid-sized biotech company in Cambridge and do alliance management. I had a very directed job search. And I think it's good to be directed, even if you don't end up where you start, because people can
Right.
network better when you say, I'm looking for this. And so, and I had a pretty big network already at that point from all of my work with different volunteer groups and other type of networking things and relationship building. So I called in my network and started hitting it hard. And I had some interviews lined up eventually for that type of job, the alliance management in a mid-sized biotech, and in a science area that I knew enough about to succeed at that. So I might have gone that direction. And at the same time, one of the good things about having a network is that when you tell people that and I could be public about looking for work because I was laid off, right? So a lot of people knew that I was looking, and a bunch of my contacts sent me the description for the executive director position at Adgene. And so and the reason,
How many people said
like
that?
4 or 5 people, and it was a private search. It wasn't a public search, so it wasn't like it was online. You had to know someone to even know about it. It was a firm, and they sent it to me because it really did just describe me. It was like a shocking. It's not shocking that, they wanted someone who had molecular biology experience. That was the core of my science expertise. Interested in, the plasmids and the technology. That's what I did in grad school. I made the freezer box that stored the plasmids. I created plasmids that were eventually sold by Promega. So I had experience in actual, plasmid technology and the use. And that's what I did in pharma as well. We did a lot of construction and, so I knew a lot about the science of Adgene and the field that they were in. Also, I had a lot of experience in nonprofits doing volunteer work, and this was a nonprofit biotech. So, in fact, some of my references were people that were never paid to work with me, but that I volunteered with because they wanted to make sure that I got what it meant to be at a nonprofit, not a
Right.
for-profit. And they wanted someone with people experience, so I had that. And they wanted someone that cared about, culture and inclusion because the company itself started out with a mission to be internationally inclusive. And, I mean, by the time I left, we spoke 30 languages at Adgene, that was part of our mission and part of our culture. And so it really was a really good match. And I don't know, you will remember this, but my network really also helped because I knew the founder of Adgene because I had handed her an award on a stage at a Women in Science event, honoring her for her founding Adgene because there weren't so many women founders at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she knew me a little bit from that. And then when I went to when you're interviewing for something like the head of a company, your last interview or one of your interviews is going to be with the board or members of the board. And so here I am on one side of the table, and there's like 5 board members on the other side of the table, right? Scary, kind of. One of them was, a professor who I knew, and who knew me quite well and knew you, so you could put in a good word for me. So that was my network working. One of them was a professor who I had actually done a project with while I was in pharma, had done a little science with his team, so knew me from that. One of them was someone I didn't know, but had been in a mentoring program that I had kicked off and spoken at and helped coordinate, and she had a very positive experience. So the interview started with her telling everybody what a great speaker I was, which is a great way to start an interview when you're a little nervous, right? So most of the people on the other side of the table were indirectly known to me, so it made that much less scary. And I went into it not sure what I wanted, but by then I really wanted the job. So that was kind of the last interview, and then I got that job. And who if you would have asked me again in grad school, are you ever going to be the head of a company? I would have been like maybe the CSO, but never the CEO. I would never have guessed in a million years, but it was just a great fit for what I was interested in, and loved being there. Was there almost 10 years, and was a great place to use all the skills that I had.
And it was a very unusual place.
Very unusual.
It was a very unusual place. And I think that what you're not saying
Yes.
is your intention right, of building a culture.
Oh, yes. And that is for sure. Like I saw it as my little petri dish. I had in my head after 20 years in the business of what it would take to make a good place to work that made people happy and productive. And by the way, was also inclusive because that was super important. Everyone is welcome and can succeed here. And I had ideas about what would do that. So I saw it as like my little petri dish of I'm going to test some things out and see what works here. And I really succeeded in most of, I mean, not everything, but many of the things that we tried to do were very effective. And, people ask me, I'm so proud. Like in all of my time at Agene, we had single digit turnover in the organization, less than seven.
Wow.
Yeah. And most of those people were going to grad school or some other, leaving
You
for, there
weren't leaving because they didn't want to work there anymore.
were a few people. I'm not going to say everybody fits in every job, but for the
But
most,
the majority,
but the majority, yeah, we
7%
right is unheard. Yeah.
is unheard of, number one. And number two, the cost savings around that.
Huge, huge.
And the productivity because everybody stays and knows their jobs.
Huge, huge. And one of the things we really specialized in was if someone like wasn't in the right position, can we find a better place to put them, a way to use them that makes them happy and productive? Because when you lose that brain trust of someone who has experience at an organization, you lose more than just replacing them. You lose this experience and this passion and this knowledge. So we would move people around actually and sort of liberally allow people to say, hey, I'm done with this job. Can I look at a different job? I
Oh,
remember
fabulous.
one person come in my office who we had made a manager in the customer support team. And he came in my office one day and said, I said, "Oh, you're doing great. Your team loves you. You're doing a fantastic job." And he said, "Yeah, about that. I hate it." And I said, "What do you mean?" I'm not going to say who it was. He said, "Yeah, I'm so introverted. I thought I could do this. I hate it. I am good at it, but it is killing me. It's exhausting. It is making me like, I don't want to do it anymore." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "But there's this other job that I think I would be really good at. What if I did this job?" And because Agene was growing pretty rapidly, we could say, "Well, hey, that is a good idea for a job. Why don't you do that? And we'll find someone else to do your job."
Wow. Wow.
And so he stayed. I think he's still there. So that kind of flexibility and listening to people and kind of superb management. Everybody who managed people had to be good at managing people, or they didn't manage people. They could have another job, you know. And so that I think that's what really contributed to it. And so that was my theory that it matters who manages you, that they care about you, that they give you, feedback, that they are advocating for you, that they're trained, that they know how to do it. That was something that I believed and I think was borne out in the results. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And I remember, full disclosure, coming to the 10th anniversary party, and there was a graph. And the startup, the numbers were okay, but you could see as soon as your leadership started, those graphs went, the bars went to the top
yeah,
in
yeah,
all of those years. It was just, I'll never forget the visual because I
yeah.
thought, look at what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean,
You're welcome. And you've done it in a culture that is so inclusive and employees that feel comfortable walking into your office and saying, I hate my job.
yeah,
You have to be a really, really, really exceptional
yeah.
boss, leader, manager of people to make people that comfortable and that vulnerability to
Yeah.
be able to come and talk about that. My hat off to you.
One of the things that made me proudest is when people would come into my office and tell me that one of the tenets we had around inclusion was, see something, say something. We want to learn from each other about our language. Language is important. As you know, I do workshops on that about as far as inclusive language. And, they'd come into my office and say, Joanne, you said this thing and you really shouldn't say that anymore. This is how we say it now. I'd be like,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank
I,
you.
I, I had an internal blog. So when I first got to the company, I realized that everyone knew what the founder did because she did everything. She had done every job at the company because she was the employee one. But nobody really knew what I did. And someone once said to me, "He's like, what do you do in your office?" And I was like, okay, I am actually pretty busy, but okay. So I started this internal blog where every week I would write I gave myself a timer, like a Pomodoro, 30 minutes to write. So it was very expository. And I would just say, here's what I did this week. I met with this person. I went to this place. I started this, whatever I could say that was public. And I would do polls and I would share the poll results openly. And I would, I would take the pulse and I would, do all kinds of things in this blog. And so people would come to me and say, Joanne, you wrote this in your blog, but you got to fix this thing. That's not, and I go, oh, thank you. I'm fixing it right now. I learned a lot that way from people of different backgrounds about correct language I had a lot of allies there who were willing to share with me their journeys and in their individual identities. And so that was really a rewarding part of the work.
And you
And
left there.
I left there. So I made it. So the pandemic hit hard. I probably should have looked to move around then, but I didn't want to leave the company in the lurch.
Yeah.
So we went into the red for the first time because when labs closed down, Agene had very small profit margin. We were distributing, we $27 million worth of material every year. But when things shut down for the pandemic in labs and no one was ordering, we had some savings. So the board said, you can spend this much from the savings, but then you need to lay people off, or you need to. So I did a whole bunch of cost cutting measures to get through the crisis so that I wouldn't have to fire people. And I did some creative things, and I raised a little money for the first time. So Agene was a revenue-based nonprofit, as you know. So I had to go raise money. So I called, I called Chan Zuckerberg and I said, hey, I need $1 million. Could you get that over to me? And they did actually. Like, can you write a one pager and tell us why we'll send it? And so we got another couple grants. My finance person was amazing, did a great job at applying for a few grants. So we made it through with a very few, we had to lay off a few people and we did a salary cap for a while, which was a non-regressive way of, I couldn't imagine lowering the salaries of someone who
No.
was needing their money for rent, whereas myself and people who were in the higher bracket could go for a few months with a lower salary. So that's how we managed to get through. And then we went back into the black because we started distributing COVID-related samples and they were very popular and very needed. So I have to say, like, that was probably, I didn't sleep for most of that year because I had to make people come to work. And if you remember that time, we didn't have enough masks. We didn't know about masks. We had to have people in a room with like plexiglass. And I sat in an office, didn't see a person. I was in my office. I went in every day because I felt like I had to be there as an example. If I'm going to make them come in, I had to come
You
in.
got to be in
But
there.
I didn't go in the lab because they didn't want extra people in the lab. I sat in my office and I kind of talked to people through the glass you know, um, and nobody, as far as I know, no one got sick on my watch. But I was so worried that someone would bring something home and get someone in their family sick, and it was really
Nightmare.
it was the most scary thing I've ever done because I cared about people. And also, another thing is because we care about people, myself and my fantastic head of HR, Tracy was amazing, is still there. She's amazing. Um, it went in waves who was having anxiety. And we had people with frank anxiety, like clinical anxiety and depression, and people who were living alone suffered greatly in the beginning, and only got worse until they learned to kind of find community. The people with kids kind of were fine in the beginning and then went crazy as it looked like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to go to school at home. How am I going to do this job thing? And so it was like these waves of anxiety. And I mean, I had, some people who were stuck on the couch and couldn't work. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to punish them. It was a stressful time. So we were carrying a lot of that anxiety, calling people every week, doing Zooms with everybody, trying to come up with ways to
Check in.
yeah, to check in. So that was super stressful. And so then I have to say my board was kind of absent during that time, except to say, don't spend more money than this. So it was pretty stressful. I was kind of out on my own. And then, at some point when we were back in the black again, the board basically said, well, it's time for you to move on. And I was like, don't ask me twice. So, so they said, oh, will you stay here till we hire the next person? And I said, oh, I'm going to give you 1 month and then I'm gone. See you later. So it wasn't the separation I would have liked, but it was the right time, I would say. Yeah. And then I went home and made scones for a few months until I recovered.
Bones.
Yeah, I watched The Greatest British Baking Show and decided it's just like science, and I perfected my
Your
scone.
scones.
Yes. And then I started looking for, as you know, for a bunch of new things to do. So,
Yeah. Which brings you to now, which, you're heavily into consulting, and the words we're not allowed to say anymore, right?
well, we don't say the initials anymore. Those are because they have been weaponized. But no
Right.
one can say that, science in the world should not be more diverse, more accessible, more equitable. So we just use the words, and that is the work that I've always done and that I still do. Uh,
Good.
I'm on multiple boards, as you know, AWIS, Cohort Sisters, which is a mentoring organization and community for Black women PhD scholars, primarily. AWIS, I've long time we've been active together in AWIS. And I'm also on the board of a science company called Open Biome, which is super interesting and great. I really enjoy it. Also a nonprofit, but when I left Agile, they lapped me up because there was a lot of overlap in their model and their work. And I work half time at a digital health accelerator because I like startups. So I spend a lot of time working with the startup land, and I really enjoy that. So yeah, that's
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you for this and your openness, which is always so fabulous. Um, I always like to sort of end these with what advice, right? Given you've had just like this remarkable career, and as you said, as that grad student, you never would have believed that you would end, that this would have been
yeah, yeah.
your journey. So what advice would you give to scientists who are starting their journey or midway through their journey?
Yeah, they're going to hear this all the time and they just don't believe it, but it's who you know. And it's not about networking and meeting strangers and exchanging business cards. It's about relationships. It's
Yeah.
about relationships, and you never know. And you can't wait till you need a job to build relationships because then it's like dating. They sense your desperation, you know? And so that is not the right time to build relationships. And so I always say it's really important to be good at your science, no doubt about it. Always do a good job, but then find something, a way that makes you comfortable to meet other people. Whether in my case, it was working with them on boards and doing volunteer work and just very naturally getting to know people, not in a forced way or in a, and being
Join a committee, join a group, join an association, volunteer.
yep.
There's your networks.
That's right. Follow your passion. It's great if that's around science a little bit. I mean, if you play the oboe and you want to join a symphony, that's nice too. But, maybe you do some work in the science community that can get you to meet other scientists, if that's your thing. And it's not such original advice, but it is the advice. It is what got me all the opportunities that I had. Every one of my career transitions was through knowing people, 100%. So, I even after everything I do now is people that knew me and were willing to give me stuff to do.
Wonderful. Thank you. What a great interview this was. I have a big smile on my face. A big smile because it wasn't easy, right? It wasn't easy. You were lucky in many ways, from your PhD advisor who said, no, you wouldn't be good in academia, go to industry. There weren't very many PhD advisors at that time that would tell somebody to do that,
There
and
were no-
not to postdoc.
Yes, they were not. He was a unique. I was incredibly lucky.
Very unique. And the postdocing really took place when you had jobs.
Yes. Oh, and I think you can learn just as much. I postdoced at industry. I mean, like,
Exactly.
yeah, you're learning the same kind of skills, for sure. Yeah. I think it is luck, but that was lucky. Although a little bit, I knew myself enough to pick the right advisor. I didn't pick the big giant lab where I would never see the PI and I would really be working with a postdoc. I knew that wasn't for me. And I didn't pick the lab where everybody was so quiet. I always felt like I was shouting whenever I asked for someone to pass me something. Like I knew myself enough. I had done enough introspection, but people say that they get lucky opportunities, but that's not how relationship building works. It's a timing thing. It's like you're at an event and you meet somebody because you know them from the last event and they know you. And they say, "Hey, I thought of you today. I'm glad I saw you. Someone told me about a job today. And you would be good for that job." That's the luck. The luck is being out there at the time when the things
Well, yes, but you have to put yourself out, which is what you said,
you
right?
have to,
You
yeah.
have to put yourself out, and you have to put yourself out in the network ecosystem that is your next job. And
And
it is relationships.
100%, it's relational. And I will say, as one final word, I know that just like in the regular population, about half of us have what you would describe as a more introverted or less outgoing, attitude toward events and networking. You don't have to not be you. If you don't do well at events, do one-on-one type of networking,
Exactly.
kind of committee. Don't try to do things that are very much against your nature, but figure out the way that works for you to do that kind of networking. And
Yeah.
actually, I always say introverts are good networkers because they're good listeners, and those are the best. Those are the best networkers. I do not fall in that category. I'm a better talker than a listener, but I admire it when I see it.
Joanne, I think that you listen quite well. I would challenge you on that. I think I've had conversations with you over the years, and you always listened.
Well, to you.
But also, no, to other people as well, to other people as well. So thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye.